There it is. Okay, so we are getting ready before we tackle chapter 8 to review chapter 7. And so we're going to look at segments. There were lots of segments this time because it was a longer chapter and some of the segments were little. And I was going to put you in groups, but because I don't know how long what I want to do is going to take, we're just going to do this together. So if somebody wants to just help us out by telling us what you would say those first 4 verses of chapter 7 were for so the first segment is verses 1 through 4.
I said the end is coming with God's wrath against Israel, with his judgment for their ways.
Okay, good. Anybody else want to share one? Are you happy with that or have a question?
Okay.
Kind of short.
I stuck in
Go
bring
ahead.
your abominations on you just because I wanted to get abominations in there.
Good.
Okay, good. Yeah, and there's plenty of other segments we can do that too, but good. Yeah, ways and abominations and the end, right? That's what's coming. Okay, how about verses 5 to 9? He gives us a little more information on that.
God repays Israel for all their abominations.
Okay. Anybody use any of the words in the way he described that day?
I put down God will pour out his wrath, and then I have a dash no pity because no, I will have no, that kind of got repeated.
Okay,
yeah.
good. He added that part describing that. Just for our review, and if you didn't use these, that are fine. How did he describe the end that is coming soon? He used some nice alliteration in there. Not nice alliteration, but disaster and
Doom.
doom.
Where is that?
Doom and disaster.
5 and 6.
Yeah.
Oh, got it.
So you might have had those, you might not. It's fine. You guys have it.
Disaster.
What you want to be careful of in some of these segments and even the chapters is that you don't end up writing the exact same thing every time. You want to find that little piece that's new. We talked about that. The Thursday class was kind of doing a lot of it's God's judgment. God's judgment. Well, I could write that for like everything in Ezekiel so far, except for chapter 1. So I probably want to be a little more specific, but how you do it, it's up to you. Just a bit of advice. Okay, how about verses 10 to 13? I found this one more challenging.
The time has come for Israel's doom.
Okay. So for those of us who focused on that and the other verses, what else could we say? Verses 10 to 13. So we weren't, because some of us would have already had that, which is fine for yours, Mary, but just look.
It's okay.
Yeah.
There's so much there. Just
I know. I did. I struggled a bit with this one. So I'm curious to see what some of you put or would put if you're looking at it now. Yeah, Evelyn?
I put, oh, wait a minute, I'm on the wrong one. But is this 10 to 13?
Yeah.
Okay, I just put the vision regarding the multitude will not be averted.
Okay, good. I ended up using part of that. Yep. And then the part from 10 and 11, what does he say? The vision against the multitude will not be averted covers the same thing, but you might have said none of the wicked will remain, right? That's the first part. And the second part, that's the picture of his wrath in these verses. Not very many verses, but again, it kind of felt like, we were writing the whole thing in a way. So, all right. How about verses 14 to 22?
I'm kind of wordy, but
Okay,
I'll take a shot. Those who survive will live in fear, shame, and mourning, and God will turn his face from them.
good. That's good. I've got some of those things in there. If anybody else do something different with it, there's a lot here in these verses. It's kind of a long segment.
I said God will turn their idols into an abhorrent thing,
Okay,
just because it was all about silver, gold, ornaments,
yeah, that's
all
true.
that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That part. Yep, I've got that in part of mine too. Mine is long for this part. I have that part too. And I have another part too that some of you might have focused on.
Yeah, verse 15,
Yeah, the dying by the sword, famine, plague, right?
Mhm.
So you could have bits and pieces of all of those. You could have focused on one part, but those seem to be sort of his big pictures there. Anybody have one they want to share or a question? All right, let's wrap it up then with verses 23 to 27.
I,
Evelyn?
I put disaster upon disaster will happen, no one to turn to.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else?
I said no peace, no word of the Lord, and Israel will know he is the Lord.
Okay, good. It's another chapter where we had that segment a lot, so you might have put it in there somewhere, or you might have
Yeah.
chapter theme. We're gonna see that a lot. We've already talked about that. And again, but that's the same thing. When Evelyn said disaster upon disaster, that's the picture, right?
Yes.
They'll seek prophets. They won't find peace. They won't find the visions they look for in the prophets. They won't find the word of God from the priests, and they won't find counsel from their elders. So all the places that they look to, which is so good. Evelyn did a great summary there, nowhere to turn. They won't have any of those good things coming to them because of where they've landed. Good. Anybody want to take a stab at chapter theme?
I had the end comes with God's wrath and judgment.
Okay, good. So we know it's about the end. We know it's about the wrath and judgment. You might have talked about the wrath and judgment by talking about bringing their ways and abominations on them. That would be one way to do it. And one focus we didn't really talk about at all. Who is God having Ezekiel speak to? Who is the prophecy actually against in this case? What's the vision here? Speak to the
Land of Israel.
The land of Israel, or
land of
house
Israel.
of
And
Israel.
so, so he means the people, but he also means the land, right? And we started to see that by the end of the chapter, that I'm going to bring the worst of the nations against you, and they're going to take your possessions. Also, when he was talking about removing that, they had turned his ornaments into their pride and profaned his temple. And so all of those things he was going to turn over. So theirs would all end in judgment too. So, and again, that's not a chapter theme. That's just helping us to remember where we've been so we can transition into chapter 8. Any questions or other thoughts before we do that, before we transition into chapter 8?
Just, Chris, do you know in 23 what the phrase make the chain is about?
I didn't look up make the chain
I
specifically.
haven't always had real good luck trying to look those things up. So
my if I was going to DD, and it kept occurring to me later and I never did, here's become my process since we started trying to do it on our own without the book, is that I will start with cross references, right, to see if there's something there. Then I'll also look at concordance. I try to do it on my own before I go to the commentaries, but I didn't do any of those things with make the chain. I just sort of focused on what he was saying about the rest of it. Anybody look that up or have any thoughts on make the chain?
What verse was that?
Is it
23.
23?
23.
Chapter
Mhm.
7 still.
It made me think of like the chain gang, the prisoners.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's what it made me think of too, bondage in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mary.
I just looked it up on Google. Sometimes that's helpful. Bible study tools. It says make a chain to bind them, not the robbers, the Chaldeans, but the Jews.
Yeah.
So it's talking about binding them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say as long as you make sure that you get that, that's the important thing, because there are some pronoun switches in there when he's talking about the nations. But yeah, all these judgments right now are actually against Israel.
Israel.
I'm
Right.
sure we'll hit some point where he's going to judge the other nations too, because he always does, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, great question. I know we didn't hit it last week, and I thought of it so many times and just never looked. But sometimes,
No, I looked it up too, and I couldn't find anything. But here
Yeah.
tonight,
yeah,
there it is.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. And sometimes when I'm moving along with all the other things that catch my attention, when I feel like I can make sort of a context, sort of good guess with those things, or I can just sort of overlook it. Sometimes my brain just does that. So I never really thought about it until we were like reading them in both classes. And then I'd go, and then I would think, oh, but nobody ever asked. So that was good. Anything else from chapter 7? Okay, well, let's dive into chapter 8. Definitely shorter this week. So I only have, there's more than 3 segments, but a couple of them are tiny. So I'm just going to combine some of the reading. So Evelyn, would you read 1 through 3? I mean, 1 through 6.
Right,
Sorry,
Casey.
that's where I'm combining. And Dee Dee, 7 to 13. And Janelle, how about 14 to 18?
Okay.
Okay, is everybody ready? You guys have okay, we can go ahead then.
It came about in the 6th year, on the 5th day of the 6th month, as I was sitting in my house with the elders of Judah sitting before me, that the hand of the Lord God fell on me there. Then I looked, and behold, a likeness as the appearance of a man. From his loins and downward there was the appearance of fire, and from his loins and upward the appearance of brightness, like the appearance of glowing metal. He stretched out the form of a hand and caught me by a lock of my head, and the Spirit lifted me up between earth and heaven and brought me in the visions of God to Jerusalem, to the entrance of the north gate of the inner court, where the seat of the idol of jealousy, which provokes to jealousy, was located. And behold, the glory of God of Israel was there, like the appearance which I saw in the plain. Then he said to me, Son of man, raise your eyes now toward the north. So I raised my eyes toward the north, and behold, to the north of the altar gate was this idol of jealousy at the entrance. And he said to me, Son of man, do you see what they are doing? The great abominations which the house of Israel are committing here, so that I would be far from my sanctuary, but yet you will see still greater abominations.
Then he brought me to the entrance of the court, and when I looked, behold, a hole in the wall. He said to me, Son of man, now dig through the wall. So I dug through the wall, and behold, an entrance. And he said to me, Go in and see the wicked abominations that they are committing here. So I entered and looked, and behold, every form of creeping things and beasts and detestable things, with all the idols of the house of Israel, were carved on the wall all around. Standing in front of them were 70 elders of the house of Israel, with Janzaniah, the son of Shaphan, standing among them, each man with his censer in his hand and the fragrance of the cloud of incense rising. Then he said to me, Son of man, do you see what the elders of the house of Israel are committing in the dark? Each man in the room of his carved images. for they say, the Lord does not see us. The Lord has forsaken the land. And he said to me, yet you will see still greater abominations which they are committing.
Then he brought me to the entrance of the gate of the Lord's house, which was toward the north. And behold, women were sitting there, weeping for Tammuz. He said to me, do you see this, son of man? Yet you will see still greater abominations than these. Then he brought me into the inner court of the Lord's house. And behold, at the entrance to the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men, with their backs to the temple of the Lord and their faces toward the east. And they were prostrating themselves eastward toward the sun. He said to me, do you see this, son of man? Is it too light a thing for the house of Judah to commit the abominations which they have committed here, that they have filled the land with violence and provoked me repeatedly? For behold, they are putting the twig to their nose. Therefore I indeed will deal in wrath. My eye will have no pity, nor will I spare. And though they cry in my ears with a loud voice, yet I will not listen to them.
I always feel like we should add until or unless after those statements, because we know ultimately that's what God says in other places, but they know that part. So we are going to do what we usually do and try to connect this to where we've already been. And we actually get a change in this chapter from where we've been. So what do we know now about the context for this chapter?
Well, it's 1 year and 1 month after the first set of visions.
Okay, so that time frame has gone by. And again, if you want to put a date on it, you can look at your timeline or whatever year you put on the first chapter. So it's another year into the exile. Remember, that's what the 6th year is of, and they dated that from that king going into exile. So that's how we had worked all that out. Anybody have the date there or want to talk about it? Depending on how you count, it's 1 of 2 years.
I found 592 BC.
Yeah, it's 592 into the 591. And so some places say 592, some say 591. So yeah, right.
I have 592.
Yeah. So, and you can use your timeline for that. So we have had a year go by. How about location? Where are we?
We're
Ezekiel's
in
house.
Ezekiel's house.
And where is Ezekiel's house?
By the river.
It could be by the river. What river, Jocelyn?
Is it Chebar?
I think it's
Chebar.
Shabar, but I can't really say it their way. So let's just have the land. That's the big thing. Where is he?
Babylon.
They're still in Babylon, so it's still in exile. Don't let that phrase throw you, right? This was a question you might have gone looking for. Who's he sitting with?
Okay.
The elders
of Judah.
The elders of Judah in his house, but they're all still in exile. So that's the picture. So we haven't changed location yet, although we're about to see some movement, but he's sitting there with them. Any thoughts about that? It's kind of interesting, right? Based on what we've just been listening to for the past 7 chapters. What do you think about the fact that he's sitting with the elders? Just
I
yeah.
found that odd because I think they would be at
odds.
at odds, right? That's the word I was thinking of. I think they wouldn't like each other.
Yeah, I mean, if we would think that in this past year, which is what it seems like, he's done the things that God has said, if that's the case, then if he was Jeremiah or somebody, he would have been locked up or thrown away. Although we know they did that at some point as well. So I just found it interesting too, that he is sitting with them. So as of yet, they have not taken that out on him, right? And so
Did he maybe not have a choice? I mean, you know what I mean? Maybe it wasn't a friendly gathering.
Could be, it could be he's tied up. Could be that he's tied up sitting there.
Yeah.
I did see there's some if you count the days in the other thing, it's possible he's actually still laying on one of his sides. as
Yeah.
well.
Uh-huh.
So,
what I was thinking.
so in that case, he wouldn't have any choice either, but
Yeah.
it could just be sitting there. It says sitting before me, so maybe he's laying tied up on his side and they're just sitting there. Which again, they're not going to be able to avoid the word of the Lord if they are. So so what happens while he's there with them?
It's caught up.
Yeah, what's that phrase?
He gets caught
Caught
up.
up.
It's caught up. Yeah, I love that phrase. What's the picture of that? What's the first, who's catching him up?
God.
Yeah, what's the first phrase that we see that tells us?
The hand of the Lord God.
Okay, so the hand of the Lord God fell on me, which we've seen several times, right? We know God is speaking to him or getting his attention. And then what does he see or what happens?
Pulls him by the hair.
Yeah. Before that, what does he see? He looked.
The appearance of the man, which is the same, sounds like the same man from chapter 1.
One.
Yeah,
Versus
chapter
chapter
1 and chapter,
Yeah.
anybody remember?
Oh, I don't
Chapter
remember.
3. Okay,
Oh.
chapter 1 in heaven, in the expanse. Chapter 3, where did he see
Yeah.
his appearance? Anybody remember the word? The one time he had to walk, he went from one place to another, and when he got there,
Oh, yeah.
it was flat.
The plane.
The plane, there we go. He saw the
Wow.
same one. So if you were to look at cross references here, you'd find those two places, chapter 1 and chapter 3. Good. So that same description. So here he sees again this appearance of the Lord.
Mm.
And then the next thing happens that somebody described being caught up. And again, how was he caught up? What grabbed him?
The Lord's hand by his hair.
The Lord's hand by a lock of my head, which if you look up, it does mean hair. Anybody find that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
Why is that
Oh, he
interesting?
had to
Well,
cut his
Because he
hair.
cut it all
yeah,
off.
I was thinking, well, it either grew back or when I looked it up, it looks like maybe it's just like the bangs. It kind of said that it seemed to be the top of the head. So,
Well,
yeah,
a year has passed. So
a year has passed. So he does have some hair. And he's grabbed by the hand of the Lord. He's grabbed by him. And then what happens next? Why is he grabbed by the hair?
He becomes part of the vision. It lifts him up in between heaven and earth.
Okay, so how does the spirit move him this time?
Lifts him.
Yeah,
Straight
by
up.
that hair, right? Does that give you all a picture of, does Ezekiel have any choice in this?
No.
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 Like a
Is
bad
it
boy.
possible, this is something we'll talk about as we go through, is it possible that maybe God might think here that if Ezekiel was given a choice, he might not want to go? Right? Kind of think about that as we move through and the question that God keeps asking him. Because if it were us, I have a feeling we might also have to be drugged by the hair. So it's a very interesting picture here because we weren't told this about the spirit before. It just kind of seemed like I think what I'm probably always picturing is a Christmas Carol, right? Do you all kind of, I didn't realize it till just now, but it's just when those three spirits come, they just kind of go, right? They just kind of float away to back in time. And so there's probably, I don't know, clouds and chariots and fire and being transported, but this is a whole different picture, right? Okay. So where did the spirit take him?
Jerusalem.
Yeah, to Jerusalem, and he uses an expression here. How do we know this is happening? This takes us all the way back to chapter 1.
What was your question?
There's a key phrase there that takes us back. We haven't seen this specific word since chapter 1, although we've been talking about them ever since.
Got it.
Visions.
Vision, right? The visions of God. So we know this is God's imagery that he wants him to see here. So we have that word. We're getting a new set of visions compared to the ones that we had had before. If we were to summarize, this could be the contrast that we use, that first set of visions from chapter 2 through chapter 7, overall, what would you say that picture is about that God has given Ezekiel?
People's wickedness.
Yes, I think we're going to focus more on the people's wickedness, what they did, right, and what they're doing. Chapters 2 through 7 showed what? Think about, especially the last chapter. That's a good way to summarize it. What's coming because of what they did?
Judgment.
Oh, the
Wrath.
end and God's wrath.
So if you think about that now, from chapters 2 through 7, God showed Ezekiel a set of vision that showed, okay. If that starts happening again, well, I'll have to ask Janelle to turn off her phone, but it stopped. Okay, so we're good so far. So we saw his judgment for what they're doing, and what do we see now in chapter 8?
The stuff they're doing.
The stuff they're doing, right? So there's kind of this transition. Again, we've been saying all along, he's talked to Ezekiel about it. He's used this word like abominations, so because they know what that means. But what must God be thinking here? I've been telling you what Israel's been doing, and if you were to think about what he does in chapter 8, what does Ezekiel need?
Kick in the can.
He needs to see them, right? Is that what somebody said? He needs him to see them. I can't just tell you, you need to see them. So that's what he's taking him for, to Jerusalem. And then we get really specific instructions here. Where specifically in Jerusalem is he taking him?
North of the altar gate.
Yeah, so when we're talking about north of the gate of the inner court is the first place, and then the altar gate, what are we talking about?
The temple.
Yeah.
So he uses his sanctuary and some other words. He uses the Lord's house, I think, but this is what we're talking about. And you had that picture in your homework. I'm super visual, and usually these things help me. I have to say, didn't really help me, and I tried doing some other looking, so I don't even have it to put up here for you, which I do sometimes. We'll just talk about it, and we can continue to look, because I will say the temple is going to continue to be recurring part of imagery for Ezekiel. Okay, so north gate of the inner court, and again, if you look at your diagram while we're going through, you can try to figure out, not everybody lines this up the way your homework has it lined up. So some people just put that north gate in the center of the north instead of the corner, which I kind of wonder why you wouldn't do that as well, but I'm not sure. So, okay, what the main thing we want to see is, what does he show him there?
The room.
The idol of jealousy.
So the first thing, right, you come upon the entrance. You come upon the entrance, and there is what there, as Deanna told us, the idol of jealousy. What do you guys think about that? First of all, what does that say to you? And then what do we think about it? Idol of jealousy. Why is it called the idol of jealousy?
I looked at some of the other translations and it helped a little bit. The one was New Living Translation, the idol that made the Lord jealous. And then some like Aramaic translation that said offensive statue of lust.
Okay, wow, that's interesting. Anybody else do any looking? If you go to concordance, it helps you a little bit. I don't have the number. I just went to look. Let's ask ourselves a question. Is God jealous of a man-made idol?
No.
He's jealous of an idol?
Mm-mm.
No.
No.
So
He's
we don't want to
jealous.
think that.
Yeah.
If he
He's-
uses the word jealousy the way we think of it, how could we describe the jealousy?
Angry.
It means anger. Literally, if you look this
Yeah.
word up, it has more of the idea of it provokes God's anger.
God's wrath, yeah.
If
Mhm.
you do want to talk about jealousy, how would you describe what's actually happening when it talks about God's jealousy? Remember, God's never jealous of another thing, right? He doesn't need to be, he's God. We use a different word than of. You could describe him as being jealous, and what would you say in that case?
He's jealous for us.
He's
He
jealous.
wants our attention.
That's right. He's jealous for them, and not even about our attention, really. When we think about he's jealous for them, he's jealous for the things he wants for them, right? He's jealous for them to be who he called them to be. And does he know this is not going to accomplish that? Yeah,
Yeah.
these are the things we want to stop and think about and hopefully have on our minds if these questions come up with people that we're saying. It's just that reminder that God knows there's a path to goodness and a path to everything you want, and that when you are deceived off that path, then he's jealous that you would be back on the path with him. Okay, we would also want to make sure that I heard this described once, that God was jealous of people, and I was like, I don't think so. Okay, you know what I realized today? I missed the other part that goes with that. What does Ezekiel see right there at that gate where the idol of jealousy is?
Glory of God.
The glory of God of Israel is there. And I realized this should have made sense. And this is where it uses the word in the plain, right? So we have that reminder and that reference. Should Ezekiel see the glory of the Lord at the sanctuary?
Yes.
Yes, he should. However, what else is there right at the same place?
This detestable idol.
This detestable idol. And it just really hadn't hit me at first. I think I was so much marking the idols and abominations. And even though I marked the glory of the Lord there, I hadn't really connected those two things. I don't know. What do you guys think of that?
Well, you talk about grieving God's heart. I mean, that is
Yeah. Yeah.
such a I mean, he has something so thousands of times better than this mess, and yet that's what they're going to.
Yeah. It's just hard for me to even imagine, because in a way we know he sort of turns he turns away from them. We'll see that description. Yet that is his house. The glory of the Lord is supposed to be there, but it really has my mind kind of whirling, picturing what they've done to the house, which is what we're going to look at this whole chapter, what they've done to his house, and the fact that his glory is there. I don't even know. I don't even know what I think about how they could even do this. So here is where, before we move on, I have a couple cross references for us, specifically from Psalm 78. If you guys want to turn there, we're going to start a few verses ahead of the one. There's a lot of places that will talk about this jealousy of God's. And if you were to read a lot of the cross references, it would help people who don't really understand what that means. It sort of takes what we would learn from the concordance and you can see it in the verses. So this is the first one we're going to go to. So we'll read at 78. Shan, would you like to read for us tonight? In Psalm 78, would you read from verse 54 to verse 59? And everybody just watch for something that would help us see what's happening here when God talks about how he feels about this. Whenever
So
you're ready.
okay. So he brought them to his holy land, to his hill country, which his right hand, I'm having trouble with my glasses, but hold
We
on.
were talking about that earlier. Yeah. Are you
Which
okay? Okay.
which his right hand has gained. He also drove out the nations before them and aborted them for an inheritance by measurement, and made the tribes of Israel dwell in the tents. Yet they tempted and rebelled against the Most High God and did not keep his testimonies, but turned back and acted treacherously like their fathers, and turned aside like a treacherous bow, for they provoked him with their high places and aroused his jealousy with their graven images. When God heard, he was filled with wrath and greatly hurt Israel.
Okay.
Lord.
So you see there, and if you want the context, this is a psalm that's telling the story of Israel, specifically through here, him bringing them out of Egypt. So this is where we're catching it. He brought them to his holy land, yet they tempted, rebelled against him, didn't keep his testimonies. Is all that familiar to us? Right? All this again happened way back at the beginning of their story. And then when we get to verse 58, it says they provoked him with their high places, moving him to jealousy with their carved images. Again, more of that provoking to anger. And then you see that in verse 59, right? When he heard them, he was filled with wrath and utterly rejected him. So again, is this a natural response for God to be provoked in this way by what they're doing? Yeah, because also, if you think about it in Exodus, how far removed are they from when he just originally gave them these laws and commandments about do not make any idols, do not cause. It's all just happened, right? And how far did they go before they were worshiping another image? Not very far, right? They made a golden calf at the base of the mountain before Moses even came back down with the 10 Commandments. So you could almost see they had hearts just ready to kind of go after other gods, which he knew. Okay. So that, if we were to look here, as you were marking the text, and if you didn't catch this, we would see that there's imagery there's words that are repeated continuously that would show us again why God drug him by the hair to bring him, that he needed to see, was what we said. So if you were to glance through here, you would continually see words like looked and behold and see and visions, and that's just all the way through there, right? When he gets to the next thing, we sort of see. So at the end of this, he says, I did what God asked me, raise your eyes, right? Raise your eyes now and look. So he looked and he saw this idol of jealousy at the entrance. What question does God ask him after that? Because this is the question that will lead you through each stage of events.
Do you see what they are doing? The great abominations which the house of Israel are committing here, so that I would be far from my sanctuary?
Yes.
Sorry.
Do you see, right? Are we going to see that question again?
Yeah.
Every time he shows him something, he's going to say, do you see? So keep that question in mind. So he calls this, do you see what they're doing? The great, what is it? Janelle read it for us.
Abominations.
Great abominations.
So he continues to describe them. So if there were any place along the way where you don't understand what you're reading and you're thinking, well, that part doesn't really sound that bad, you would just remember that God calls it an abomination, right? Because in some of these segments, without concordance or a Greek mythology book in front of you, you wouldn't really know for sure what they're talking about because there isn't any other biblical context for some of these things. But we automatically know that it's not right because of two things. One, where is it happening?
The temple.
In the temple. And two, God calls them abominations.
Abominations.
So if you, I think a lot of you did the Exodus study with us, or if you've done any other studies from that time on, we've been in a lot of places in Leviticus, you know a lot. And in fact, if you've read Israel's history where they rebuilt the temple, there's so much writing about what was supposed to be happening in the temple. Is there a really specific design for what God has going on in the temple? Did he give good detail? Yeah, he laid it out exactly.
Yeah.
Is that what we see in chapter 8? No, it's not. Okay, so that's going to be your clue every time, is that do you see, and then the next part of the phrase is, but yet you will see what?
Greater abomination.
Greater. So it's as he moves along, every single thing in God's eyes is a step worse than where they had been before. And again, even though I'm not going to bring up a picture for you, if you're looking at your chart, if you think about that, this movement of getting worse, in terms of the temple, what else is happening? If you think about the direction that things are going, and by the time we get to the last segment, if you had a way to describe the movement that you think is going through the temple, what else is happening? They start off at the edge, at the gate, at the, and where are they going to end up?
And closer to the inner.
God's holy place.
Closer to God's holy place, right? So that picture, no matter how it kind of looks and how you would design it, it does go from outer to inner, and from worse to worser, to more worse, right? To worse to more worse, greater abomination. So that's kind of a picture we can all have in our heads as we look at the next segment. So how does he describe the location starting in verse 7?
The entrance to the court.
Okay, so we went from the entrance to the outer entrance to sort of the entrance of the court. And it says, I looked, right? I looked. There's another one of those words about the vision. And what does he see?
The hole in the wall.
He sees a hole in the wall. We can ask one question that we can tell the answer from. Can Ezekiel see everything he needs to see through this hole in the wall? Why
He has
not?
to dig through.
Oh,
He has
that's
to
it. Yeah,
dig.
make it bigger.
He has to dig through the wall to see the whole picture. So it's almost like it was a tiny little peephole, a tiny little hole, and God says, you need to dig through here so you can see. Now he says, in fact, he says, go in and do what?
And see
See what?
the wicked abominations.
The wicked abominations. And then what do we learn what are the wicked abominations?
I
Idol.
have to say it.
Idol.
They've carved a bunch of they've carved a bunch of idols on the walls.
Right.
Yeah.
So we can see the list of them, but yeah, carved on the wall. Again, remember, where are we?
In
In
the
the
house
The
of the
house
Lord.
of Israel.
Temple, and
Yeah.
they carved on the wall. They carved idols on the wall, including what?
Bugs and
Yeah,
Detestable
beasts.
things.
yeah,
Creepy things.
beasts,
Beasts.
detestable things. Everything that they would have worshipped. And if you, through your studies of scripture or through knowledge of some of the other peoples at the time, you just think of just Egypt alone, right?
Yeah.
In the
Yeah.
time of the pharaohs, they worshipped everything but God, right? They worshipped everything but our God, pretty much.
Mhm.
They
And
had
in the dark.
and in the dark, which we'll talk about here too. So at that point, so
knew it was
he
wrong.
sees those things, and then what else does he
Knew
see
it was wrong.
besides the carvings?
70 elders of
70
Israel.
elders, yeah, in
Yeah.
that court. And what are they doing?
Have the censer in their hands and fragrance of the cloud of the incense rising.
So what's that picture mean, Jocelyn, that they have incense and censers?
Didn't they do that for God when they were making sacrifices and so forth?
Yeah, so we would call this part of what?
Worship.
Worship. It's a worship that they're doing here. Again, this is what's kind of blowing my mind about the fact that Ezekiel sees the glory of the Lord there. Is if Ezekiel can see the glory of the Lord there, shouldn't they also be able to see the glory of the Lord in the temple, and or at least know he's there? This is really just sort of beyond.
Or if they're looking for him.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
weren't
they're not
looking-
looking for him.
They're
And-
not. They're not. And
No.
we know that because of what they're doing. Somebody already said it. And remember, he had to dig a hole in the wall for him
Yeah.
to see what they're doing, because where are they doing this? How is this described to us?
In the
Dark.
dark.
Inner court.
In the dark. There's that question again. So if you didn't kind of underline that whole phrase, this is your next step. Do you see what they're doing in verse 12? And they're committing, right? See what they're committing in the dark. And why are they able to do that? It's sort of, I guess it goes to my difficulty understanding how they're doing this with the glory of the Lord there. What is their defense? They say to themselves.
He doesn't see
Lord-
us. The Lord's
Because they're
forsaken
doing
us.
it in the dark.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're in the dark.
Naughty
The Lord
kids.
doesn't see us. The Lord has forsaken the land. Now, in a way, could we say they're right?
Mhm.
The Lord forsaken the land? But is that
Yes.
who's doing is that?
There's.
Theirs.
And they're doing.
And are they right that God doesn't see them even if he has forsaken the land?
No.
No, they're not. And that's where we're going to go spend a little bit of time looking at the same picture of, has God spoken about this possibility to them? So we're going to go to Deuteronomy 31. I'll let you get there, and we're going to start, I think it's kind of in the middle. We're going to go through a few segments of it that relate really directly to this. So think about this picture. They're saying God's forsaken the land, so he doesn't see. I don't know, that's sort of the thing of what does that say to you when a group of people or a person is saying, oh, well, he's forgotten about us and doesn't see us anymore? Like, what kind of heart or attitude does that sound like? Who does that? I can think of people who do that. They're small people. Toddlers, right? Do toddlers and kids think that my dog does this too, by the way. Oh, well, she made me mad, so now I'm going to go take that thing and go play with it because she's not doing what I want her to do. That's exactly actually what she does. Kids do that, right? They get mad and they think, it's like the little kid who's going to run away from home, and they think they're punishing you, and they're thinking. So that's kind of this picture of, you can see their attitudes, their hearts, their spiritual immaturity maybe. Okay, we're going to start with verse 16, and we're just going to read through verse 18. So Sarah Chantry, could you read that for us? 31, 16 to 18, and then we'll stop and talk and we'll read a little bit further.
The Lord said to Moses, "Behold, you are about to lie down with your fathers, and this people will arise and play the harlot with the strange gods of the land, into the midst of which they are going, and will forsake me and break my covenant which I have made with them. Then my anger will be kindled against them in that day, and I will forsake them and hide my face from them, and they will be consumed, and many evils and troubles will come upon them, so that they will say in that day, is it not because our God is not among us that these evils have come upon us? But I will surely hide my face in that day because of all the evil which they will do, for they will turn to other gods.
Okay, does this sound exactly like what's happening in the book of Ezekiel?
Yeah.
Yes. And who is God telling this to in Deuteronomy?
Moses.
Moses. Mhm.
He's saying, he is telling him, these are his last instructions to Moses before Moses goes away to die. This is what the people are going to do after you leave. And I need you to know, because I have some things I want you to tell them. So, does he lay out exactly the pattern of how this happens?
Mhm.
Right?
Yes.
Does he just decide one day to just turn his face against them?
No.
Oh, no.
No.
Uh-uh.
What have they done? What does he say they will do? And in fact, they did it many times before we get to Ezekiel. What's the pattern? He blesses them, they go somewhere, then what do?
Forget 'em.
They forget all about him.
And they
Yeah.
turn
Break
to
my covenant.
idols. They break the covenant, and then he says, I can't be with you while you're in this state, but we don't see it here, but you can return to me and I will return to you. That's always the part we don't see in some of these verses, but we would see them if we read enough. And so he's laid that out for them. But this is what we want to see. We want to remember, even then, even in this word to Moses, is he going to give up on them completely? Let's look and see. Lisa, could you read that same passage, just go from 19 to 22?
All right. Now write down for yourselves this song and teach it to the Israelites and have them sing it, so that it may be a witness for me against them. When I have brought them into the land flowing with milk and honey, the land I promised on oath to their forefathers, and when they eat their fill and thrive, they will turn to other gods and worship them, rejecting me and breaking my covenant. And when many disasters and difficulties come upon them, this song will testify against them, because it will not be forgotten by their descendants. I know what they are disposed to do, even before I bring them into the land I promised them on oath. So Moses wrote down this song that day and taught it to the Israelites.
Okay.
What it was.
Right. He said, I know what they will do, that when I have blessed them, when they arrive at the place I've taken them, they will forget about me because life is good. And then they'll turn away, and then I'll have to turn away until they call back. This is what he said. But he still, the question I want to say is, even though he knew that was what was going to happen, did he go ahead and take them to that promised land? He did. So he didn't just say, I'm done with you ever from the beginning. He went ahead and took them there, even though he knew what they would do. I need to see if our next part I want to read is a bit of a jump. If Jocelyn, would you just go down and read verse 29 still in Deuteronomy 31?
Oops.
And this is Moses now speaking to the people in 29.
For I know that you are sure to become utterly corrupt and to turn from the way I have commanded you. And days to come, disaster will fall on you, because you will do evil in the sight of the Lord and arouse his anger by what your hands have made.
Okay, so what is it their hands are making?
Idols.
Idols. So this brings us all the way back to this idea of jealousy, the idol of jealousy, provoking him to anger by that. And when you look at that correlation and that picture, is there anything out of that that makes God look unfair, or is if he didn't tell them, or as if he didn't warn them about what would happen?
No.
No. Did they have choice?
We're not going to say.
They had choice, right? And they knew. So what we see in Ezekiel chapter 8, does it relate at all to God's history with his people?
Yes.
Totally. Yep.
All the way back to the beginning, exactly what he would say. And you know what's beautiful, and I wish we had time, but we don't. If you go home tonight and you read Deuteronomy chapter 32, it is all about this song that Moses wrote. It is about the rock, the capitalized rock, the rock of their
Godlike.
salvation, right? So it's a beautiful thing. We can't read it tonight, but in there it says that he will yet vindicate his people and will have compassion on his servants when he sees that their strength is gone and none of them remain free. When you think about that phrase, that this will happen when
Where's
he
that?
sees, this is Deuteronomy 32. It's like the whole chapter. So I just
Oh,
kind of gave
got it.
you was what I'm saying. If you go read this, this is the song he had Moses write.
Oh, okay, that's the song. Okay.
Yeah, but it's about the rock of their salvation. Who's the rock being pictured in Deuteronomy?
Jesus.
Jesus.
Jesus. So right after telling them everything they were going to do, he gives them the promise of Jesus, the rock. It also says sometimes they won't follow him. But this part I want us to think about is he says, when they have no strength left, then I will I will vindicate my people. What do you think about, what does that say about a people? Does it speak about them? The fact that their hearts, he has to bring them to a place where they have nothing left. And that's when he knows that they'll be ready to hear from them. Yeah, what do you think about that? Is that something anybody could recognize, either, you know, in the past in yourself or in other people, of having to sort of get, I think we call it rock bottom, right?
Yeah, we
When you
do.
have to hit the bottom before God can come in. You know, there's a stubbornness and an independence and a pride, right?
Yeah.
And this has been their picture all the time, right? Janelle, were you going to say something?
But it's just such a picture of where our country is headed. It's just like, ah.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting, even though we don't have lots of cross references in our homework, the place that they went to focus on for application in this week, I just thought, wow, I think you guys wrote this homework for where we are right now. That's the idea. So that's something we want to keep in mind, right? So now think about that picture, a people that have to go all the way down, like they have nothing left, is what he's saying. They're so weak. So in Deuteronomy, he says, when you get so weak that you have nothing, is that what he's describing in Ezekiel chapter 8 and in 7 and 6 and 5? They've had to be brought to a place of famine and plague and being taken captive. All of those things they've had to lose their pride and independence. Think about that now, and now think about the question, why do they think he can't see them? Because the passages we just read that talked about him abandoning them, does it ever say he won't see them? No.
No.
Oh, it doesn't.
Why do they think he can't see them?
We humans seem to have this idea that if we do it in the dark, then nobody sees, nobody knows, not even God.
Okay, that's definitely one of the pictures, right? If we do it in secret, if we do it in the dark, he won't see. Any other thoughts? Why they think
I feel like he's abandoned their land so that he's no longer near.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Seems like they've thought that, but scripturally, do you think that that's what scripture would tell us if we go look at some verses? No. Let's find out, okay? So I have so many. I can't let's see. Let me give some of you a verse and I'll give you a second to look them up and then I'll let you read them out. So this is us answering the question, did God ever say he would stop looking at them or stop watching over them or stop
Never.
talking about them. So let's
Never.
grab just a few verses. So where did I leave off? Amy, would you take Job 22:13? Stephanie, can you do Psalm 10:11? Evelyn, Psalm 14:1. Dee Dee, Isaiah 29:15. Sarah, Isaiah 47:10. And Shan, John 3:19. So I'll give everybody a couple minutes and then hopefully I'll remember where I started and we'll call back in that order. I started with Amy. That's right. Okay.
These aren't in our lesson.
No,
No, they're not in your homework. You'll just have to look it up. Yeah.
Okay, I was still looking in there trying to find it. I thought,
Yeah,
oh, I
I'm
missed
sorry.
it.
I know I read that list quickly, but we'll read it again as each
Yeah,
person
that's
has it,
fine.
so you can put them down.
Okay.
There's, one of the reasons I feel like God has me lead homework is because I need this level of homework in my life. And so there isn't enough homework for me. So I actually have to go.
Oh,
Okay.
good.
So
That's
we're
really
going to
good.
start with Amy with Job 22:13. If you guys want to write that down, and if you looked up verses for us, if you want to hold your space and flip, we'll have her read it. But if you want to turn, you can to Job 22:13. And remember the question
Oops, I thought it was
answering,
23.
is God still watching over them? Okay, Amy.
Okay. You say, what does God know? Can he judge through the thick darkness?
How about 12 and 13? Sorry.
Is not God in the height of heaven? Look also at the distant stars, how high they are. And you say, what does God know? Can he judge through the thick darkness?
Okay, so can he? Do we think he can? He's
Yeah.
looking at them, right?
He
How
made
about,
them.
so the next one, if you guys want to list these, Psalm 10:11 is what Stephanie's going to read for us.
Thank you.
Psalm 10:11.
He says to himself, God has forgotten. He has hidden his face. He will never see it.
So this is another person, and I think this psalm would describe them as the wicked, would say, God's forgotten, he's hidden his face, but let's
He'll
keep
never
going.
see us.
The wicked think God isn't
How
watching.
about Psalm 14:1, Evelyn? If you want to write it down, it's Psalm 14:1.
The fool has said in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They have committed abominable deeds. There is no one who does good.
Okay, so it's a fool who would say that there's no God and that no one can see. That's not good. I'm not sure why I kept that one. It's a good verse, but Dee Dee, Isaiah 29:15. Whoops, you're on mute, Dee Dee.
Got ahead. Woe to those who deeply hide their plans from the Lord, and those whose deeds are done in a dark place, and they who say, who sees us, or who knows us?
So far, we're looking at more and more people in places of scripture where they just question whether or not God can see them. So is this a foreign idea that in Ezekiel, they think that God can't see them? No, it's not at all. We have two more, and I could have brought so many. Janelle, Isaiah 47:10 is the next one you guys want to write down. Isaiah 47:10.
Did you say me initially? Because I didn't hear me.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I give that to somebody else? Did I go?
I don't know.
Maybe I didn't. Okay.
You gave me 49:10.
Oh, that's the wrong one. How about Sarah? Would you do 47:10? Does 49 fit also?
I have 47:10.
Oh, you have 47:10.
Must be a good one.
Okay, well let's have whoever has Isaiah 47:10. If you read that one.
No
Sorry.
one sees me.
Shan, do you want to read it? Do you have it?
Oh,
Or
yeah, I can. You felt secure in your wickedness and said, no one sees me. Your wisdom and your knowledge, they have deluded you. For you have said in your heart, I am, and there is no one besides me.
Okay,
Mm,
so this is a
wow.
person again, describe your wisdom and your knowledge have led you astray to think that you're secure in your wickedness. Again, these are amazing verses. Who did I give John 3:19 for? To?
Me.
Oh, okay. I gave you both, Sharon?
Yeah. Well, no, you didn't give me 47:10, but that was what I had written down was 47:10.
Oh, okay. Oh, good. All right. Well, I'll let you have John 3:19 also.
Okay. This is the judgment that the light has come into the world, and men loved the darkness rather than the light, for their deeds were evil.
Okay, now think about all the reasons why perhaps the men in the wall of the temple think God can't see them. If you were to look at all the things we just heard, what are some of the things standing out in your mind?
Men love darkness rather than light.
Okay, so Jesus says they actually like it. They don't want to be out in the light. That's one of the things. What did we see in the verse before that? What have they put their reliance in instead of in God? What led them astray in Isaiah?
Their wickedness.
Their wickedness, their own wisdom and their own knowledge, right? You see that they just don't understand God, right? He's forgotten us. They're corrupt. They're a fool, right? Foolish people would say God can't see. And they think if they deeply hide. So this is the imagery, and it appears to be a frequent thing in scripture that people who have walked away from him think he can't see them. Now we're going to go to the verses. So I'll try to do a better job with these that actually say, should they think that? Should they know better? Is he going to see them? And so let's divide up another set of verses. Mary, would you do Psalm 14:2?
Okay.
Lori, Psalm 34:15. Lisa, Psalm 11:4. Jocelyn, Job 28:24. Now let me go catch the people I missed. Janelle, 2 Chronicles 16:9, and Sarah, Hebrews 4:13. So I'm going to list those all again while people are looking, and you can Psalm 14:2, Psalm 34:15, Psalm 11:4, Job 28:24, 2 Chronicles 16:9, and Hebrews 4:13. And then we'll say them again when people read them. This is a great set of verses. And I have one other set too. Okay. Where did I start? Mary, Psalm 42. Does God still see even when he has turned his face?
The Lord looks down from heaven on the children of man to see if there are any who understand, who seek after God.
Okay, so he looked down, right? All right. Lori, Psalm 34:15.
The eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous, and his ears are open to their cry.
Okay. Lisa, Psalm 11:4.
The Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord is on his heavenly throne. He observes the sons of men. His eyes examine them.
Okay, even in his holy temple and his throne in heaven. Great verse to connect us to Ezekiel, right? Both the throne and the temple. Jocelyn, Job 28:24.
For he views the ends of the earth and sees everything under the heavens.
He views and he sees. Okay, Janelle, 2 Chronicles 16:9.
For the eyes of the Lord move to and fro throughout the earth, that may strongly support those whose heart is completely his. You have acted foolishly in this indeed.
Yes.
From now on, you will surely have wars.
Okay, 16:9. He's looking, his eyes roam, looking for those who show themselves strong on his behalf. All right, and Sarah, Hebrews 4:13.
And there is no creature hidden from his sight, but all things are open and laid bare to the eyes of him with whom we have to do.
So this is an
What was
idea
that
that
reference? 4:13 Hebrew.
Hebrews 4:13.
Thank you.
This idea that how far away from God do you have had to walk before you actually start to think he can't see you, right? That's another picture of the top. What do babies think, or little kids, when they hide from you and they can't see you? What do they think?
Can't see them.
They think you can't see them. It's just the same, right? We are hiding from you, God, so we are just going to assume that you can't see us anymore either, because they've taken that. I'm going to add another one that I'm going to read for you.
Go ahead.
Psalm 121, 1-3. I'll let you guys turn to it if you
I have a
want.
question. Lori had a question, I
Okay,
think.
go ahead, Lori.
I was just going to ask, did they have these written already in the temples, the Old Testament?
Not written, probably. I don't think they had, well, they had scrolls. I don't know which ones all they had as they moved forward through time, but they
Okay.
definitely had them orally at the temple. Like, this is what they would
Yeah.
hear, right? This is what they would hear when they studied. And I think they were in the process of having them written. So they probably had some, but not all. I don't know when they got the whole scripture of the Old Testament.
I just think on their behalf, it's like they didn't have cameras and telescopes and you know, the word that they could listen to all the time.
No, but they did. In fact, if you look through the Old Testament, places like Ezra and Nehemiah, where they were supposed to be reading it out to the people all the time, and then
Yeah.
that's one of the things that they did, was they put it aside and they stopped doing it. And so we could see that that's another part of the picture, right? Just like in chapter 7, when God said, you can seek peace, but you won't find it. There's no counsel, there's no word of the Lord, because they stopped.
Right.
Remember, that's a great scene in I think it's with Ezra, when he's weeping because they found the scrolls when they got it back, and they read the whole thing in front of the people, right? And they weep and they mourn because they realize what they've done, but they put it aside. But that's why he said, tell your sons and daughters my word, bind it on your arms,
Put it on your
the houses, so that you won't forget the word of the Lord, which would be a great tie-in for us to remember why it's so important to be in his word. So let's look at, let me go ahead and read Psalm 121, 1-3 for you. I will raise my eyes to the mountains. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to sleep. He who watches over you will not slumber. Behold, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. Is God ever going to stop looking at Israel? Nope. In fact, it says you in general, but also specifically Israel. He doesn't slumber, he doesn't sleep, he watches his people. I couldn't help but throw in one more that's just been a favorite of mine ever since studying Genesis, that one of the names for God, El Roy, literally means the God who sees me. This is Hagar speaking when she's out on her own with Ishmael. Then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, you are a God who sees me. For she said, have I even seen him here and lived after he saw me? And so that's El Roy, R-O-I. That's one of the names of the Lord. So it's built into his name that he sees us.
Yeah.
So imagine
That's
how
good.
far, imagine the disconnect, right? That they would think or deceive themselves that he cannot see them. Oh, you guys, I'm just gonna drive you crazy because I'll let that one go. Okay, I'll let that one go. I have another one. On your own later, you could read the entire chapter of Jeremiah 7, and it follows this really nicely as well. Okay, let's move on. So as he's seeing them in the wall, worshiping these carved images, God asks that same question, do you see what they're doing? And then what's he say in verse 13? Yet you will see greater abominations, right? So when you stop and think about every single thing he's already seen, and yet even now you think, okay, greater abominations than the elders of Israel worshiping images they've carved into the wall in the dark, in the secret, in the temple. That sounds pretty bad. What's the next tiny little segment? What is it that where does he go and what does he see? Where does he go first?
The entrance to the gate
Okay,
of the
so
house, which is on the north. So it sounds like he might be outside where he
yeah,
was.
so some people think that the wall he just looked through is actually back out, the outer wall. Some people think it's the wall of the inner part. Again, because we know he's going to get closer. And again, this was where I started to struggle to be able to really place things. And I kind of just thought, well, I'm just going to get what I can from the chapter and we'll see as we move forward. What is it that he sees? Who does he see?
Women who are sitting there weeping.
Yeah, women who, if this is inside, should they be there?
No.
No, so that's a possible step one of this being an incorrect picture, is that they had a court, women did get to be, but there was a certain place. It's possible they weren't in the correct place because it seems like we've moved interior to some degree. Again, there's all kinds of different ways people describe this. So what are they doing there?
They're weeping over Tammuz, and Tammuz was a god that they created in Babylon. It was the god of spring vegetation. So when it died down, then they would weep over the fact that the vegetation had died down.
Yes. So instead of trusting God who created seasons and times, this is basically a superstition, right? So this is also similar to the Greek mythical god, is it Adonis? It's the sun god as well. So the Israelites built this in fact, they named their spring month Tammuz because of this, where in the summer they had sun and vegetation. And so this god somebody made up, was alive. And then in the winter season, they mourned over him dying because they no longer had sun and fruitfulness. Does this sound like people who are following God? This is not. This is superstition and mythology and things that came from other. So they're sitting in God's house, weeping for the death of a mythological god. How's that sound? I think they could be weeping in the temple, but what might they be weeping about?
The fact that God was there looking at them.
Maybe their sin, maybe their, their repentance, maybe their forgiveness, maybe a
lack of fertility.
Yes, that's what they're looking for, right? There's a lot of other things tied to this that you can go, if you read far enough in commentary or just the mythology part of it. Most likely, just sitting there weeping is not the full picture that we have here. And that's it. That one sentence is apparently enough for God to say, do you see this? Yet you will see greater abominations. But by the way, there's only one segment worse, right? So this is pretty bad in God's sight. Okay, so what is the last part? Where does he take him?
Temple between the porch and the altar.
Yeah, so this is where you can see between the porch and the altar, they are right before the holy place, right? Who
Mhm.
are the only people that can go into the holy place?
The Holy of
Be
Holies.
the high priest.
So the high
Mhm.
priest can go into the Holy of Holies. Who can go into the holy place?
Just the head priest.
The priest.
All the priests, right? So the priests are the only people that can be what we're looking at. So, behold, between the porch and the altar, what does he see?
25 men.
25
25 men with their backs to the temple.
Yeah. So who most likely are these 25 men?
Priests.
priests, yeah.
Priests with their back to the temple. Okay. Doing what?
Prostrating themselves.
Yes.
Bowing down to the
Sun
sun.
down
Bowing down to the
to
sun.
the sun.
So women are weeping over a made up Babylonian god. Priests are turning their back on God's house and worshiping the sun in the east. That's what we've come to. And
It's
then
pretty
God,
bad.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
and then God says, "Do you see this, Son of Man?" How does he describe then what they've done? What do you take from the next verse, verse 17?
They think it's probably an act of contempt toward God. They are mocking.
Yeah, you're looking
God.
at that second part. So first of all, it calls it, is this too small a thing that they do this?
Oh,
And yeah, what part are you talking about, Janelle? I know what you're talking
the
about.
twig to the nose.
Twig to the,
Yeah.
yeah, thumbing their nose.
Behold, they are putting the twig to the nose. So Mary says, yeah, like thumbing your nose. Anybody have any other thoughts or expressions, or did you look up what you think this is?
That's what
I looked
do.
it up.
Yeah.
It's a pagan practice. It's part of a worship practice, or they thought that it would protect them from God.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of different things, some of it involving twigs and bouquets to the face or the nose. There is some thought it literally does mean something to the effect of, we would say, of thumbing your nose, based on the scripture that I think that I skipped is the one that talks about them thinking that they in a way are hurting God, but really it's hurting themselves. They say, and you think you're really provoking me, but really what you've done is against yourselves. So in a way, that verse kind of lines up with that idea here of thumbing their nose at God, but it could actually be another pagan practice that they're committing. Again, none of this stuff is really pretty to read because it has to do with also hiding odors and things like that. So these fragrant bouquets. This idea, what does this idea about them worshiping and bowing to the sun, should they have known that was wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I have a verse, but does anybody know, like, why would it be wrong for them to kind of bow to the sun? About
Another, yeah, well, the Egyptians worship the sun god, so it's another idol.
it's another idol, and God was really specific. You don't have to turn there. If you want to jot in your notes, you could write Deuteronomy 4:19. Deuteronomy 4:19. God says, "Be careful not to raise your eyes to heaven and look at the sun, the moon, and the stars, all the heavenly lights, and allow yourself to be drawn away and worship them and serve them, things which the Lord your God has allotted to all the peoples under the whole heaven." So who created those things?
Yeah, God did.
They are the created things. Yeah. Not, and so they were worshiping the created instead of the creator, which we're going to run out of all the time I have. It's Jeremiah 7:19. Are they provoking me, declares the Lord? Is it not themselves instead, to their own shame? So that's the verse some people would put with the twig to the nose, is Jeremiah 7:19. So I do want to keep us a couple more minutes. I want us to think about the application, and sort of in the same way that your homework had you think of it, but it was really a focus on today, right? Our culture, our world, which we've already been talking about. And you guys had a lot of opportunity to answer that. And I want to think, if you had trouble answering this, or how we would look at it, maybe a place that we could start to think about, do we have these same issues and would we expect to? My question was, let's think New Testament. What if instead of Ezekiel, we were reading the book of Romans? Would it sound anything like what God is saying here in Ezekiel? Now, we already looked at one verse when we talked about abominations, but if you guys turn to Romans 1, we'll do this, and then maybe we'll have to use what I had for the rest of it for review when we come back. But let's go ahead and look at Romans 1. We're going to start with verse 16, which I haven't used this expression in a while, but if you guys remember, I call these verses bumper sticker verses, like the ones that you'll see on bumper stickers, plaques, and walls, but then nobody ever understands what goes around with them. So Romans 1:16 is kind of a bumper sticker verse, but we're going to go all the way to 23. Actually, looks like we're going to go further than that. It's like I have 20 down to 25. So I'll read for you so you can follow along. But remember, this is Romans 1. Paul's letter he wrote to like the first group of people, at least that's the order in the Bible. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For in it, the righteousness of God is revealed from faith to faith, as it is written, but the righteous one will live by faith. So now he's going to contrast the righteous in this next segment. This are the people that are not. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of people who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. So that's what this group of people are doing, because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, that is, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived, being understood by what has been made, so that they are without excuse. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their reasoning, and their senseless hearts were darkened. Does that sound like Ezekiel, what the people were going through?
Yeah.
Claiming to be wise, they became fools. We just had some verses about that. And they exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of corruptible mankind, of birds, four-footed animals, and crawling creatures. Is that what we've seen? In fact, in chapter 7, God said they took the beauty of his ornaments and turned them into their own pride, into their own idols, right? They exchanged them. Therefore, God gave them up to vile impurity in the lust of their hearts, so that their bodies would be dishonored among them. For they exchanged the truth of God for falsehood, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. Do these sound like similar warnings? What about this? What does it mean to worship the creature rather than the Creator? It's Romans that actually describes that. Is that happening in our day?
Oh, yeah.
How would we describe that happening today? How do people worship the creation instead of the Creator?
To mankind.
Okay, you could be worshiping men. Yep.
Water. Well,
nature, right?
Yeah, the earth. Yeah.
Now, again, we have been called to care for the earth in Genesis, but can you take it to the point where you worship that creation over what God has said about people and other things?
Yes.
Yes, this is a topic that you can watch with great interest where we are today. If we were to jump a little bit further in Romans to verse 32, I think that's and although they know the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. So this is where I'll leave you. I will, that's
32,
one
verse
32.
32.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Gosh.
So I'm going to leave you with a few questions that I wanted us to get to. Based on that, think of Ezekiel, think about Romans, think about what we've already been called and said to do in Ezekiel chapter 3. Can we stand by and ignore evil around us?
Shoot.
What's the repeated question that God gives Ezekiel in chapter 8?
Do you
Do you
see?
see?
Do you see? So this is where we'll start next week. Think about this. Are we supposed to see? Are we supposed to see the evil that exists around us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, we can either look at it, we can hide from it, or maybe God will grab us by a lock of the hair and make us go look. So that's where we're going to head. So for homework, go ahead and do day 2, which is chapter 9. I think that's just day 2 of lesson 3, right? And so just cover chapter 9, but we are going to go through a little bit more, a few more cross references, which were supposed to help us end on a hopeful note this week. The verses I have, unfortunately, we'll have to save that for next week. But this is what I want you to think about, that there's purpose. There's purpose in us having to look, right? It's hard for us to continue, just like it was in Isaiah, to read chapter after chapter after chapter of the difficult things. But just like the good promises came in Isaiah, they'll come here as well. And think about, if God made Ezekiel go look, then there's purpose in us looking as well. So hopefully that's a little bit hopeful. It's not as hopeful as where I wanted us to end. But before I turn off the video, I am going to give you my Psalm 119 verse for this week, which I thought was really sweet, starting for today. Psalm 119:54. Your statutes have been my songs in the house of my pilgrimage, which, as you all know, I have a special place in my heart for the pilgrim words. So plus this is the week we're getting ready for pilgrims. So that's a beautiful verse. Actually, that whole little stanza, well, it's all good. Okay, that's going to end the video. And this is the first time I think I've kept us late this semester. So we need to end. All right, everybody, happy Thanksgiving watching online.